All right, we are going to start at the top of page 3 in this training document. Um, we're going to use Shane's administrator account and kind of walk through how accounts are created in the system. So at the top of page 3, it mentions that the Clearview administrator is sending an invite to a participant. That's going to happen through a particular study that person will be assisting with. So for example, in this case, we'll use DemoCorp source. And once we move to that study, there's a tab here in the middle that says Assign Manage Respondents. This is the area where we would add any respondents that we need to take this study. So I'm going to go ahead and invite a new respondent. I'm going to put in just some fake data for this user. And I'm going to have them just have access to all the studies. And once I save that, the respondent account gets created. You'll see here on the left. You'll see all the information that I entered, including the survey assignments. And then an email will actually be sent. And you see here the email that was passed through. It's going to look something like this. And what they'll do is, assuming they're not on the same computer, they'll be on their own computer. When they click this link, it will actually take them to a place where they can finish creating their respondent account. So I'm going to finish creating mine. And once I create, it automatically logs me in and takes me to the dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that back over here. And we're going to pull that script back up. We're going to pull the script back up, go back to page 3. And it goes through and talks about what that email does. It allows them to create a new account and gives them their credentials to be able to log into this at any point. And then from that point forward, the end user will always just go to nas.clearviewanalyzer.com, and in here they'll put that same email address that their account was created with and their password, and they'll be able to log in without any problems. Okay, so here's the dashboard that they land on. The training document says from here you can access the surveys to which you have been assigned. Only surveys to which you have been granted access will show on your dashboard. So if I were to log back in as Shane and I were to uncheck some of those survey assignments, then here on the dashboard, the surveys that were unchecked, they would actually disappear from the dashboard. They wouldn't have access to those surveys. All right, a little further down towards the bottom of page 3, it says, now let's take a look at a survey. You will notice that each survey is organized according to the points collected in the methodology that we discussed. So we're going to go into the payroll survey, and we're going to see that there's things like profile information, processing labor, processing non-labor, system maintenance labor, system maintenance non-labor, etc., all the way down to the bottom. And this document further down goes into a little more detail, but that's how you get to it. And to get back to the dashboard, there's just a link up here that takes you back. Pretty simple. All right, it says you'll notice at the top of each section, so this is the top of page 4 in the training document. Actually, page 1, 2, 3. Oh, I started at the top of page 4. I'm now moving to the top of page 5, where it says you will notice at the top of each section there is a show training video for this section link. It is highly recommended that you take the time to watch these 3 to 5 minute videos. etc. So inside of payroll, which is where we just were, under processing labor, there is a link here that says show training video for this section. And that just opens up essentially a link to a private YouTube channel and explains exactly how processing labor works. And then you can click on this link to hide it once you're done. You'll see the same link under processing non-labor, system maintenance labor, system maintenance non-labor, outsourcing fees, field labor, and I think that's, and also under financial risk. You'll see as well. You won't see one of those under profile information, but the rest of the sections you will. And then it goes on to say, the other help feature that is somewhat common throughout the Clearview survey structure are learn more links. So under outsourcing fees, well, here under processing labor as well, but in the document it talks about the outsourcing fees section. There's a learn more link that they can click on, and it will actually show them some samples. So under processing labor, there's a learn more section that gives you some explanation on how to fill out that question for full-time employees. All right, as we go down further, it says, let's begin with the general information survey. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard. I'm going to click on general information survey. And inside of here, it talks about a couple of resources from their team having to fill it out. It says we are looking for information about number of employees, number of managers, etc. There's also, the survey also collects quantity information, such as new hires. Right here you'll see, and then labor rate for each of those categories. There's another question here that gets the estimated, let's see, it's leveraged to collect basic units of measurement that are used to calculate different pieces of total cost to model. As you can see, we're looking for information about number of employees. We also use this survey to collect other quantity information such as number of new hires, a breakdown of pay cycles, and the annual cost of those cycles. So we just talked about that. In addition, we collect the estimated number of resources that work in the HCM model. That's going to be down here. Question number 4 into the financial section. Let's see, we use this to benchmark. In this survey, we also collect the estimated benefit load factor, which is right here. Question number 5. Most of the information can be determined with basic queries of their system. And then it says there are 4 main points of data that are collected in the finance section outside of what we just talked about. First is overhead costs or facility costs. That's questions 1 and 2. As you can see, they can allocate by percentage or by cost per resource what those costs are. It also does a collection of the total HCM budget, and then you can spread that budget by percentage across the number of pillars that are activated for that particular study. And then the last thing, of course, is the deployment. This takes into account any current systems, ERP solutions, etc., and those costs and how they're allocated across, again, the pillars that are activated for this study. Okay, then it goes on and it says that we're going to use the HR survey as a sample to review each of the sections. So in the HR survey, we'll switch to that. There will actually be a profile information section. This is really used simply for benchmarking and for calculating the per employee cost per year. So we only collect one item of information, and that's how many employee records are in the HR part of their study or their company. Then it talks about processing labor. So it says in the processing labor section, you identify all resources that work in this area. Also include any resources that may do these functions but may not report directly to HR. Again, the training video up here is where they should be directed. But you can see here in our demo company that we've already got 7 resources added. Adding a new resource can be done with this new resource button down here. Anytime you add a new resource, it tells you obviously that the resource is not complete. But also, as we talk about the task section, you're going to need to save this before moving to that task level. So we're just going to put in demo employee. We're going to say they're full-time and that they get paid $25,000 a year. And then we're going to click save, and you'll see that this save needed is going to change into this task icon. And this task icon, it goes on in the very bottom of page 5 and the very top of page 6. It talks about clicking on the task link and putting a percentage into the task that the individuals perform. So if I click on this task link, right now inside of this section there's only one tab. In other sections like payroll, there's multiple tabs. But basically, we can take 100% of the hours that they've designated for this pillar, which is HR, and we can say if that person worked 500 hours, in our case it's 2,000, it's full-time, but sometimes employees are split across multiple pillars. Whatever that hour allocation is, we can take a percentage of that. So at 2,000 hours, we can say that they spend 15% of their time doing data entry. Maybe they spend another 20% auditing records, and then everything else they do, another 75% or 65% is other non-specific. And you'll see over here on the left-hand side that this slowly fills up until it shows 100%. And then they can save. And if they want to, they can go to other resources from here that they may have added, so they don't have to keep going back to the survey every time. Okay, and then it talks about, you'll see here an example of 3 people that do the exact same thing. They're just grouped together, and then their hours are estimated at 3 full-time employees. And so numbers get calculated accordingly. One thing that this document talks about is something called an RA worksheet. It says some organizations have resources that work in many pillar areas. As an option, you can enter resources at one time using the resource allocation worksheet. Dano, in that case, the person that's logged in right now is just a respondent. They don't have access to be able to use the resource allocation worksheet. But an admin or a consultant or an ADP sales rep should be able to log in and pump those employees in. So if they wanted to gather the employees or write them out on a sheet of paper or a spreadsheet, they could then log into this study from this area, and they can actually go under study actions and choose resource allocation worksheet. And what that allows me to do is that allows me to add new employees. And once I've created looks like my screen's a little bit too small to get to that X to be able to close this. We're going to say this is a full-timer, $50,000 a year, and we're going to say 100% of their time is spent in payroll. So once we hit create, the new person is created. They're allocated at 100%. And then what we can do from here is we can actually select them, and we can actually load them with this button. And if we load them into payroll, they'll actually show up as loaded. We can't do anything else with this particular resource. But if we wanted to, we could come back. We could go back to the study. In our case, we could go into the payroll survey. And if we go into processing labor, we should see demo employee 2 that we just entered. We could have, from that resource allocation worksheet, also put in tasks. I should have shown that. In this case, we can just come in here and we can actually fill this out. But you can also do it from the resource allocation worksheet. Okay, so I'm going to log out and log back in as the user that I created. If I can remember, I can't remember. the account I created. Test 100. Okay. Let's log back in. Let me pull that training video or training script back up. Back down to page 6. Okay, so we've taken care of resources. Then it goes on. Okay, the processing non-labor section contains 4 questions that are exactly the same in each pillar. So if we go back into the HR survey, we can go into the, see, this says processing non-labor contains 4 questions. So these 4 questions, they're exactly the same across every pillar. You can see that here, and it says, remember that on the General Information Survey, we already collected the HCM budget. When calculating total costs, the system will automatically subtract these costs. Then in the maintenance labor section, it's the exact same thing as processing labor, except you're identifying IT resources as opposed to HCM resources. And then system maintenance non-labor. There is 3 pieces of information asked. Again, very similar to the processing non-labor section, except this deals with the IT budget. The big difference in this section is the deployment question. This deals with current systems being used, trying to collect information, basically trying to figure out how these costs are going to affect, how do they currently affect the total cost of ownership, and then how they could affect total cost of ownership moving forward as part of the ROI report. Okay, now we're going to move to the outsourcing fees section. Right here on the left, again, the document talks about this being costs that are outside of their company, things that they outsource, things that they get done by people outside their company. Okay, the field labor section is, let's see, one section is quite different in every pillar survey. This is very true for payroll and time and labor. What actually appears there is dependent on whether one or the other or both are activated. Okay, and then we've got the last section, which is financial risk, corporate opportunity assessment. As it says in the training document, this has less to do with total cost of ownership and more to do with the ROI report and what could potentially be the cost and the savings based on any risk that is caught or that is calculated. Anyway, that is it for that training script. Hopefully, this video has been helpful. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Dano.